Joined. Joined. Joined.
Trustee Danko.
Joined.
Alberta.
Joined. Joined.
Trustee Miller.
Joined.
Right.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting
Joined.
for Monday, April 26, 2021. This is Trustee Dawn Danko. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. I'll remind people as they come in to put themselves on mute when they're not speaking. And I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement as I call the meeting to order. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We've respected long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. At this time, we will play O Canada.
Joined. Joined.
Jonathan Britton.
Joined.
Leah Wade.
Joined.
Caitlin.
Joined.
Thank you, everyone. And I know we have a lot of visitors coming in on the call this evening for Profiling Excellence. If you're just joining us, we've just finished O Canada, and I'll ask you just to mute yourself if you're not speaking. I'll start with item 3 then, our meeting roll call. I've got regrets from Trustee Archer. Trustee Bingham?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Penny B.
Joined.
Good timing, Trustee Dees. I was just doing roll call. I believe I heard you come in.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone signaled she might be late. Just check, are you here yet, Trustee Johnstone? Don't think she's here yet. Trustee Miller?
Present. Thank you.
Joined.
Thank you. Trustee Mulholland?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Pagan-Miller sent regrets. Trustee Tutt? Trustee Tutt?
Present.
Thank you.
Joined.
I have regrets from Student Trustee Hessler and Sagawanagalver.Segi. Student Trustee Zakar?
Present.
Thank you, and I've noted that you do need to leave us a bit early this evening. Okay, so at this time we will move into item 4, profiling excellence, and I've heard a few more people come on the line. As you come in, if you can put yourself on mute, and I'll just remind everyone on the call if you can be on mute unless you're speaking, just for our virtual meeting norms. Before we go into profiling excellence, I'll just remind...
Joined.
I'll remind trustees that where we need a mover or a seconder, I will assign people. If you're not comfortable with what I've assigned you as a mover or seconder, please just unmute yourself and let me know. As usual, we'll do a negative vote, and you just need to unmute yourself and indicate if you're against a particular item. And again, please remain on mute unless you're speaking. So I will turn things over to Superintendent Stefanian for our Profiling Excellence Awards.
Through the chair, Director Figueredo, this evening we're going to ask Superintendent Paul Denemy who will be taking the lead on profiling.
Jared Magalano.
Joined.
Megan Castro.
Joined.
Thank you, Director Figueredo, and I know
Joined.
we might want to just wait a moment as we have a few more people coming in from the sounds of it. Okay, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Denemy.
Thank you, Chair Danko. It is very exciting, and I'm privileged to bring forward our profiling excellence for the month of April. Tonight, we are focusing on our students and staff that participated in the Eyes on Youth and Start a Spark from Dundas Valley Secondary School. Dundas Valley Secondary School has a history of providing opportunities for students to share their voice, achievements, understanding, and experiences as co-learners through a variety of conferences, workshops, and presentations. The 2019-2020 Global Connect class chose to create two very different and important events to support students throughout HWDSB.
Oliver Robinson.
Joined.
Engaged and connected students throughout our board. The first is Eyes on Youth Art Exhibition from December 13, 2019. This art exhibition took place at the Old Cotton Factory in Hamilton. It was a wonderful and powerful opportunity for students to share their voices and gain valuable knowledge and experience with human rights, business, and the UN goals for sustainable development. Students from every school within HWDSB were invited to share their voice through their artistic expressions, as well as to attend the event and explore and experience a wide variety of artistic submissions on display. There were more than 150 art installations that included paintings, drawings, sculptures, mixed media, spoken voice, and interpretive dance. More than 250 guests enjoyed this event, and many expressed their gratitude and appreciation that students would choose to celebrate and share their vision for the future through artistic expression. The second event was Start a Spark Retreat that was held on January 9th, 2020. The Spark Retreat took place at Carmen's Banquet Center. It was an event for students in grades 7 and 8 designed to explore the UN Sustainability Development Goals with the purpose of addressing each goal in a meaningful way within our school communities. The students in the Global Connect class designed, created, organized, advertised, and facilitated the day, leading skills development workshops and discussions. In their continued support for the UN goals for sustainable development and the DVSS school vision, it was the positive difference they can make in the lives of others. Approximately 120 grade 7 and 8 students from 9 different schools within HWDSB attended the retreat, and their energy and enthusiasm were amazing. Many initiatives were designed and then implemented in the various schools with continued support from the Global Connect class, well beyond the completion of the conference and even the school year. I'm excited to bring forth the names of the students that had this impact on connecting, inspiring, and engaging our students within HWDSB. Please join me in celebrating them. Erica Appel, Cole Baton, Jessica Bars, Jonathan Britton, Megan Castro, Rowan Chilvers, Ella Coburn, Audrey Ewan, Lily Freeman, Ruby Gubechican, Kiona Hazen, Brennan Henney, Ella Hendricks, Caitlin Heward, Wazal Khan, Severin Keene, Isabella Kovach Kowalski, Jared Magolino, Casey Maloney, Kayla McAdam, Grace Openstein, Alberta Pullen, Oliver Robinson, Jessica Scar, Nuha Saeed, Kira Verscher, Leah Waite, Steve Whidden, and Ashley Wright. Staff that supported and were inspirational in supporting students within these endeavors were Lisa Dupuy, Peter Toth, Gail Cipriani, Michael Murray, Jonathan Schinkel. I ask that we join together in thanking and appreciating our Profiling Excellence students and staff.
And if people would like to unmute and clap for a moment, that would be a nice way to celebrate our Profiling Excellence Award winners.
Joined.
Thank you to everyone who was able to join in today, and it's such a great opportunity to hear about the work of our students, and thank you to the staff for their support. I hope that we'll be able to see something like this in person at some point. We're sorry that we didn't get to see you today, but great job, everyone, and thank you, Superintendent Dunamy, for bringing this forward. At this time, I'll give our guests a moment to step off the line. I'm sure you don't want to sit on and listen to the rest of our board meeting, and we'll just pause for a moment so that we can get through all of the notices.
Your over score.
Left.
Gail Cipriani.
Left.
Peter Toth.
Left.
Jared Magolano.
Left.
Ashley Wright.
Left.
Ruby Gebekjian.
Left.
Audrey Ewan.
Left.
Caitlin.
Left.
Lisa Dupuy.
Left.
Alberta.
Left.
Kayla McAdam.
Left.
Leah Waite.
Left.
Jonathan Britton,
Left.
Oliver Robinson.
Left.
Cole Baton.
Left.
Brennan.
Left.
Megan Castro.
Left. Left.
Severin Keene.
Left. Joined.
Okay, I think we can continue. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see everyone in person. For item 5, looking for an approval of the agenda, I'll have Trustee Bingham move that. Trustee Mulholland second it. Are there any questions or amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll just note that Trustee Johnstone just joined the meeting as well. Thank you for letting us know. And so is anyone opposed to approving the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move to item 6, declarations of conflict of interest. I'll note that I've received none in writing. Do I have any declarations for conflict of interest from trustees? Hearing none, we'll move on to reports from legislated committees. Item 7 is our Parent Involvement Committee from April 6, 2021. Trustee Deese, would you like to bring forward the report?
I would be happy to. Sorry, my apologies. I'm just having a hard time on my computer pulling it up. Let me just switch computers because I've got it up on both. So actually, first of all, there is a couple of corrections to the members present. Unfortunately, both myself and Becky Buck were not in attendance as we had a program meeting that night. There were a couple of information items. The first was in regards to a letter to the ministry, and that PIC had asked us to support sending a letter to the ministry advocating for educational staff to be a priority to receive a vaccination, and it was felt that a parent voice would help in adding that to the situation in regards to the vaccines. Item B was in regards to elementary and secondary graduation, and with public health protocols in place, there's a need for safe and celebratory grade 8 and 12 graduations. So the graduation committee gave an update on some of the items that are being discussed, and it was acknowledged that all plans are tentative as public health protocols can change at any time. And with that, I will bring forward the report.
Thank you, Trustee Deese. I'll have Trustee Buck second that. Are there any comments or questions, and that's a motion to receive the report, any comments or questions from trustees or student trustees? I'll open it up. If you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself and let me know, and I can create a speakers list if needed. Hearing none, I do have just one question for clarification. It sounds as though PIC, the Parent Involvement Committee, will be writing a letter to the ministry to also advocate for vaccination, priority vaccination for educational staff. And as trustees and our student trustee knows, we've sent a letter. Can I just, through the director to the superintendent, Jones, for the committee, can I just confirm, is PIC going to be sending a letter, or has that happened? Sorry, that was to Superintendent Estella Jones.
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The letter was crafted and is being sent from PIC. So I'm not sure what the date was that it was sent out, but they did write a letter to be sent out to the ministry through the chair. Sorry.
Thank you for confirming that. I think it is helpful anytime we can add additional voices and advocacy for this item. Are there any further questions or comments?
Through the chair, the director, just confirming that it was sent out, I believe, April 7th. Confirming from our communications manager who supported PIC, that April 7th the letter was sent. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, is anyone opposed to receiving the Parent Involvement Committee report? Hearing none, That passes. We'll move on to reports from community advisory committees. Our first item, item 8, is French as a Second Language Advisory Committee from March 29th, 2021. Trustee Buck, can you bring forward that report?
Yes, of course, Madam Chair. French as a Second Language Advisory Committee met on March 24th. I unfortunately had to send regrets. In the course of the meeting, there were the first item was advice sessions, French as a Second Language teacher recruitment and retention. This presentation was made by Superintendent Jamie Nunn and Manager of Staffing and Human Resources Operations Letty Goddard. And they presented an overview of HWDSB's efforts to recruit and retain FSL teachers, including having an open application on applied education and recruiting at facilities of education. The committee did provide feedback. First, that need to address the need for subject areas, such as having science teachers who are qualified French teachers as well. Find ways to acknowledge and recognize staff who are French as a Second Language qualified, as well as to consider how to encourage current HWDSB students to continue with their French and become qualified French as a Second Language teachers. We then moved on to Grade 1 French Immersion application process. Staff presented an overview of the process for the coming school year, including timelines, communication strategy, and enrollment numbers. There were 603 students enrolled in Grade 1 French Immersion for 2021-22. 597 students were placed in their home school and 6 in an out-of-catchment placement. 68 spaces remain available to the 43 late applicants. The committee provided positive feedback on the communication strategy and the navigating the application process. We also had an update from Canadian Parents for French, and they shared that a one-year membership with CPF Hamilton Wentworth is free for individuals, families, and organizations, including schools, until the end of March 2021. They can be followed on Facebook at CPF Hamilton, and you'll see the link there in the package. The CPF is holding an information night for, I'm not going to try and say the school name, but maybe I will, Université de l'Ontario Français on April 7th, and I'm so sorry to any French listeners who just witnessed that. The CPF extended thanks to HWDSB staff for their collaboration, providing the Concours d'Art Oratoire. Staff provided an update as well on learning resources, DELF, and remote learning. And with that, I would submit the report.
Thank you, Trustee Buck. I'll have that seconded by Trustee Galindo. Are there any questions or comments to the report? And again, this is to receive the report, so I'll just ask you to unmute yourself if you have a question. Hearing none, is anyone opposed to receiving the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee reports? Hearing none, thank you, that passes. Our next item is item 9, our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit Advisory Committee report from April 7th, 2021. Trustee Bingham, can you bring forward the report, please?
Yes, I can bring forward this report. Thank you. The committee held a virtual meeting via MS Teams on Wednesday, April 7th from 9 to 11:30 a.m. with co-chairs Vanessa Henry and Christine Joseph Davies presiding. Deha Hande, our knowledge keeper, gave the opening and closing address. This report is being submitted with much respect. We want to take the time to acknowledge all essential frontline workers in all fields that are making it possible for us to continue our lives and livelihood during these difficult times. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these ones. Action items, recommendations from the committee. In recognizing the current environment environmental climate, not only in light of the global pandemic and the current precedents of dismantling systematic racism and oppression, and specifically in the context of the Board of Trustees at HWDSB, we must examine the implications of Indigenous student leadership and board governance. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action affirms the responsibility of all treaty partners to look critically at the implications of colonialism, systematic violence, institutionalized racism, discrimination, and oppression across all sectors of governance and leadership. At HWDSB, we must consider what it means for Indigenous learners, families, and communities as we approach the advancement of Indigenous education, Indigenous cultural safety, and more specifically, the role of the Segawanagowaduts. They raise their voices of the community, or basically the Indigenous student trustee. As partners in education, we must decide how to move forward, ensuring the safety, well-being of their Segawanagowaduts, and the moral and ethical imperatives for the inclusion and integration of Indigenous governance practices and Indigenous knowledges and ways of knowing, being, doing across all spaces and places of the institution. As Justice Murray Sinclair asserts, public school systems have largely failed about concerning respect for Indigenous people. They taught everybody that Indigenous people were inferior, had no rights, had no existence, had nothing worth talking about, that they were heathens, savages, pagans, uncivilized, that they were lucky Europeans came here and saved them from extinction, which is all mythology. They basically taught white supremacy, saying that the white Europeans who came here and settled saved this country from being nothing, and therefore they teach the myths of white superiority, and those twin myths of Indigenous inferiority and white superiority are the terrible results of the public school system. And that was, he spoke that in 2021. Public schooling systems such as residential schools and federal Indian day schools were deliberately instituted by the co-commitment relationship of the church and state to enact policies, programs, and practices which reinforce their combined efforts to, quote, kill the Indian, save the man, end quote. The last residential school to close in Canada was 1996, and a year later, the federal Indian day schools closed. In 1959, the United Nations endorsed the international rights of the child, but residential schools were not removed from the Indian Act until 2014. We call upon the Board of Trustees and senior administrative leadership at HWDSB to humbly consider the ways in which we correct this systematic injustice and move forward together in peace, friendship, and mutual respect, as instructed in the Two-Road Treaty Agreement. A, the Segawanagowaduts. They raise their voices of their community. The First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Community Advisory Committee, FNMICAC, intends to raise the Segawanagowaduts this year. FNMICAC recommends that the Board of Trustees respect the distinct nature of the dedicated Segawanagowaduts seat of the Board of Trustees and commit to co-constructing a cultural shift with Indigenous stakeholders in education, working in parallel to enable ethical engagement and consultation in all policies, programs, and practices of the institution. In consideration of cultivating safety for the Segawanagowaduts, the Board of Trustees shall comply with the following provisions. A, the Segawanagowaduts, 1, is or are to be protected and safe in every way. 2, they must be loved and recognized for their distinct place. 3, represent Indigenous sovereignty and or a community of treaty partners with a unique and distinct relationship with the Crown and settler states of Canada and the United States. 4, both parties, Segawanagowaduts and the Board of Trustees, must recognize their responsibility as a treaty partner in the Two-Row Wampum Agreement. 5, both parties maintain the inherent responsibility of protecting not just this generation of learners, but the next generation of learners as well. B, professional learning and capacity building. 1, the very name, Sagawanagoladats means they raise their voices. That person or persons would come in and raise the voices of those they represent, Indigenous student community. A commitment to ongoing professional learning, leadership, and capacity building for Indigenous learners by Indigenous learners, surrounded by meaningful cultural support personnel. For example, the elders, Indigenous knowledge holders, our aunties, stakeholders in Indigenous education and wellness, etc., is an integral component of this process. 2, HWDSB Board of Trustees commit to actively participating in a comprehensive capacity building series to enable them to begin to understand Indigenous cultural safety and restorative Indigenous education models and apply these knowledges, worldviews, and practices in their governance and decision-making practices and processes. C, operational structural considerations. 1, the Board of Trustees Handbook reflects the provisions of the Sagawanagoladats and the inclusion of Indigenous stakeholder voice, perspectives, and contributions in all matters of board governance. 2, utilizing the concepts of the dish with one spoon. The board must also commit to the sustainability of Sagawanagoladats, the Indigenous stakeholder consultation, and therefore make space to enable the sharing of the resources to occur through broader financial and personnel investments. D, polishing the chain. And 1, to ensure the consistent accountability and renewal of all this of this covenant relationship rooted in peace and friendship. The Board of Trustees and the Indigenous Education team at HWDSB will meet annually to reaffirm our commitment to Sagawanagoladats and ethical engagement and consultation with Indigenous peoples at HWDSB. B, final recommendations of the external investigator and the implications of the Sagawanagoladats and Indigenous cultural safety. The final recommendations, although positive for all or most citizens, have inherent consequences and implications for the unique space of which Indigenous peoples are situated. FNMI CAC recommends that all final recommendations of the external investigator be critically analyzed and reviewed by the Indigenous cultural safety team to ensure appropriate strategies for and by Indigenous peoples are considered and implemented respectfully. Some initial considerations and recommendations include A, Recommendation 4, that by June 30th, 2021, the Board shall establish a formal student trustee mentorship program which provides detailed guidelines for mentorship, including the purpose of mandate of mandate of mentorship, the roles of different mentors, timelines for mentorship meetings, and what matters are to be addressed. The FNMI CAC recommends that the Board of Trustees respect the two-road treaty relationship and advance an independent parallel approach of Sagawanagoladats that recognizes and affirms Indigenous conceptions of leadership, mentorship, enable space for the interdependence of both Eurocentric and Indigenous mentorship program models to bridge gaps, learn from, with, and alongside each other where appropriate. B, Recommendation 5, that by June 30th, 2021, the Board shall establish an enhanced student trustee orientation program, which includes a review of the student trustee mentorship program, the trustee code of conduct, governance issues specific to student trustees, and the complaint and investigations policy and procedure referred to in item 2 below. The FNMI CAC recommends that the Board of Trustees support a motion to enable the Indigenous Education team to work with staff to create the framework for the Student Trustee Orientation Program. C, Recommendation 6, that prior to August 30th, 2021, the Board shall require mandatory human rights, equity, diversity, and inclusion training by HWDSB's Human Rights and Equity Officer or external facilitators with human rights and EDI expertise, which is to specifically include anti-racism and anti-oppression training for all trustees, including student trustees, and thereafter on an annual basis in August of each year after the election of the student trustees. The FNMI CAC recommends the Board live into its commitment to working in parallel with the Indigenous communities, recognizing, honoring, and affirming their distinct approaches to Indigenous human rights policies and practices, while also making separate and distinct space for anti-colonialism, anti-Indigenous racism, and Indigenous cultural safety training. Information items. C. Selection of committee co-chairs. Co-chairs were selected by the committee and are Vanessa Henry and Christine Joseph Davies. D. Updates. The committee received an update from Jordan Carrier about reimagining educational programming partnerships with HWDSB. Creating safe, positive, and inclusive criteria. An event on April 21st with C.C. Rose. Respectfully submitted by Vanessa Henry and Christine Joseph Davies, co-chairs. And down at the bottom you will find, or all through the report, and at the bottom you will find definitions, notes, and appendices for anyone who is wondering about anything that they're not sure of through this whole report. And with that, I give the report. Thank you. Submit the report.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham. And I'll, as the other member of the FNMI committee, I would second that report. As there are action items, this would be a motion to approve the report. So as this is an action item, I will go through a roll call to see if there are questions or comments to the report, and noting that it is quite comprehensive and has a number of action items. Let's see, I will start at the top of the list. So Trustee Bingham, you brought forward the report. Did you want to provide any comments to the report and to the action items?
Not at this time. I don't need to, but I do know that I'm pretty sure we do have our Indigenous lead on the line with us in case we do need some extra answers. That's Jolene Johns. So hopefully we will be able to, and if there are any questions, we either have Superintendent Dunlop or Jolene Johns to be able to help with answering any of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Buck, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do. This was such a large report, and so I'm having a hard time gathering all my thoughts so quickly. One question that did stand out to me, so under on page 9-3, bullet C2, under utilizing the concepts of the dish with one spoon, it speaks about our commitment to the sustainability of the Segregated Garladot in Indigenous stakeholder consultation, and therefore make space to enable the sharing of their resources. I'm getting the sense this is a financial consideration, but what exactly does that look like lived out? So is it just is it just requesting that we maintain this position in perpetuity, forever kind of a thing? I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Thank you. And I'll go to the director, and if you can start and pass it on.
So thank you to the chair. I will ask Superintendent Dunlop, who was at the meeting, to provide insight. And again, our Indigenous lead is here as well. So if Jolene John can add, and then I'll ask Sue, the director, to her any further questions. So to Superintendent Dunlop, please.
Thank you, Director, and thank you to the chair, through the chair as well. While I could speak to this, I'm going to defer to Jolene John, the Indigenous lead for HWDSB, who is on the line, who will answer the question. Thank you.
Through the chair, so thank you very much. I'm Jolene John, Mohawk Nation Turtle Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and the Indigenous Education lead here. And of course, most of you should know what the dish with one spoon wampum means, and that's almost basically like equal distribution of assets, of resources on the land, and to share. And it's an opportunity to ensure peace and friendship. And so this concept actually came from a best practice practice that is happening right now at McMaster University. And so somebody on McMaster, Jordan Carrier, had recognized that in order to ensure the sustainability of both the Sagawanagadauts and Indigenous stakeholder consultation, that we cannot always rely on Indigenous education funding dollars to provide that stability. I think that there needs to be investment in the other financial arms of HWDSB. And so I think that it was a call to enable the Board of Trustees and Exec Council to think about the distribution of, broader finances and resources to ensure that this commitment is met and not always just heavily relied on through funding dollars that are specifically derived from Ministry of Education directed to support Indigenous education. Does that answer your through the chair?
Thank you, Jolene, and thank you for being here and sharing that answer. Trustee Buck, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much for the answer. Looking at the next item below it, titled Polishing the Chain, it says to meet annually between the Board of Trustees and the Indigenous Education team. So was there any specific time that we would have built into the trustee calendar where trustees could count on that meeting? Was there a time of year that the committee had thought would be best, maybe like as we're looking ahead to work in September or maybe meeting in August? I don't know. Just wondering if that has already been decided, if we were to approve this package tonight.
Thank you. And to the director to direct that.
Thank you. I'll just continue to direct questions connected to this report to Superintendent Dunlop and to the Indigenous Education Lead, Jolene John.
Thank you, Director, and through the Chair. So the timeline has not yet been decided, and we would hope to do that in consultation with the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, just writing that in my notes.
Sorry, Trustee Buck, can I just pause there for a moment and just check in with Jolene John? Was there any suggestion from the committee regarding a timeline?
Thank you. Through the chair, there was no suggestion from the FNMI-CAC committee. I believe that is still up for consultation with the Board of Trustees. Thank you. Through the chair.
Thank you. Sorry, back to you, Trustee Buck.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. So I'm just trying to read my chicken scratch on the fly. So further down on that same page under the B for the final recommendations of the external investigator, looking at bullet A, then the bolded part, the FNMI-CAC recommends that trustees respect the two-row treaty relationship and advance an independent parallel approach for Sagawanagadauts that recognize and affirm Indigenous conceptions of leadership. Just under that point, I was wondering, as we are firming up everything that the external investigator had recommended and trustees had approved, will this independent and parallel approach include all three of our student trustees? Is that what that is getting at as they do their training leading up to the start of their term in August each year? Through the chair.
Thank you, Trustee Buck. If I can start through the director to Superintendent Dunlop.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I'm going to defer to Jolene John for this answer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Dunlop. Through the Chair, this process means it's twofold, basically. So it enables space for an independent approach to allow the Indigenous community, in partnership with Sagawanagoradots, to really look critically at what it means, what Indigenous leadership and mentorship means, and to develop that process organically from a grassroots community lens, but then to also then it's a separate, but it works codependently as well too, and interdependently with the former process of the Student Trustee Mentorship Program, because I think that really there needs to have distinct space for Indigenous conceptions of leadership and mentorship because it looks different. And I think that this is an opportunity to learn from and with and beside each other to just see the differences in leadership approaches and mentorship approaches. So I think that it's separate, but also an opportunity to enhance student trustee learning and development. Through the Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Bach?
Thank you so much for all of that information. I appreciate all of the hard work that clearly has gone into this presentation, including the appendices and the definitions that were provided that were so helpful. Speaking for myself, this is a newer journey for me, coming to understanding of what working alongside Indigenous people mean. And so just all of the work and the patience from the group as we've all been kind of walking a journey of learning and understanding these many months. So thank you all so much for the answers to the questions, and I'm done for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Thank you. And through the Chair, first of all, thank you for this report and the depth that it goes into. I think I have similar questions to Trustee Bach, and just wondering if we approve this, what the next sort of tangible steps are.
Thank you. And thank you, Trustee Dees. I'll start with the Director.
Thank you. Through the Chair. What you can definitely see here is some alignment to the recommendations of the external investigators report. So staff would want to make sure this is embedded in the recommendations already provided, and who the third-party firm that will be determined in the month of May will be part of this. But then the second thing, as we heard through Jolene, is that the consultation needs to continue with the advisory committee and our trustee representatives who are there around these. So I see those two key structures, governance committee and our advisory committee being involved, and our Indigenous education team being involved as we map out all these pieces. Some are aligned, and some, as Jolene reminds us, are in parallel. Through the Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to my list. Trustee Galindo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the work that's being done behind the scenes on this topic, and I appreciate the work of the committee to really offer some comprehensive and tangible recommendations that the board can consider tonight. I think it's an opportunity for us as trustees to essentially put our money where our mouths are, and for that reason, I fully support the recommendations as they stand, and I appreciate the questions that have already been asked. My questions have already been answered, but I fully support the report and the recommendations. So I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
Thank you. Echoing the comments of my colleagues, I want to thank all of, staff, the committee, and our and the Sago-Wana Garladot as well for all of the work, thoughtfulness, and feedback and requests. And I don't know if request is the proper word when I'm thinking of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, nation to nation, that it is. I think that even the very fact that we're having to pass this as a board of trustees, while at the same time recognizing that this is coming nation to nation, I think that perhaps this report and motion tonight, as stated within the report, becomes the launch of looking at how we, as a board of trustees, work with and pass motions collectively rather than as a hierarchical board, particularly with this report. So it's I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear, but if it is a nation-to-nation relationship, the very fact that the board is a body of government still has the final say, that undermines that nation-to-nation relationship. So I guess where I'm going is that I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation and exploring ways and how we truly come together in that spirit of collaboration and in that spirit of recognizing the important, equal, and powerful role of an independent role of Sago-Wana Garladot. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Johnstone. Trustee Miller?
Thank you. And my specific questions have already been answered, but I do very much appreciate the work that has gone into this report. And in terms of, I fully support the various action items within tonight's report. I'm hopeful that this is a beginning, a true development of a deeper relationship and learning. And for my own self, as the current student trustee mentor, I'm just very excited to bear witness to this development, to learn, to question things, but very much appreciative for all of the time and hours that it's going to take from both sides. And ultimately, as a student trustee, mentor, and as someone who is so supportive of the role, particularly for the Indigenous student trustee, but also, the Sago-Wana Garladot, I do want to make sure that role is safe, that role is supported in the most appropriate way possible. So I'm very excited about this report tonight, and I hope that we can just keep doing more and doing it in a deeper way. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. Trustee Mulholland?
No comments, through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Tutt? Trustee Tutt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions or comments. I'll be supporting the recommended action item. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Trustee Zakar? Student Trustee Zakar? I'll just check in again. You may be still on mute. Student Trustee Zakar?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Oh, there you are. We can hear you. Did you have any comments or questions?
No, I have no questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. And most of what I was looking to ask for clarification has been asked. I do want to echo the thanks that have been said already to the Indigenous Education Circle, our Indigenous team, and the FNMI Committee for the extensive work that's been done in developing this comprehensive report and these comprehensive recommendations. And it just so helpful that you've also highlighted the historical context, the negative impacts of the public education system that requires that we take action, and then provided a clear way to move forward. One question I do have, just to follow up on a question that was asked earlier about next steps, I'll go to the director. Will this report or the details from this report filter through the governance committee so that we can start to map out timelines, and how might we ensure that our Indigenous team is part of that work through our committee work?
So thank you through the chair. So the answer is yes, but we need to work in parallel. So we'll need to involve our the Indigenous Education team and the advisory committee as well. So when we are working together, then those reports should be going to not only the governance committee, but also to the First Nation, Métis, Inuit Community Advisory Committee as well. So we'll work through that process in parallel, and to really try to model the two-row wapen belt, as Jolene has reminded us about. So this is a great opportunity for us to model that through both of those structures and with the Indigenous Education team. Through the chair.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to that, some of the items are specific perhaps to governance, and some are specific to finance, but we may need to fully understand what additional recommendations or specific recommendations for resources or personnel may come forward from the Indigenous Education Circle and the FNMI Committee. So would it start in governance and then we'll refer items to the appropriate area, or how do you think we might move forward through that, Mr. Director?
So through the chair, that would be my recommendation as we work in parallel with the Indigenous Education team and the First Nation, Métis, Inuit Community Advisory Committee and our Governance Committee. Once there's consensus there, then it might need to go to another trustee committee. For example, if there is a resource piece that requires a budget decision from trustees, then it might need to go there as well. So we will work through that process, and as long as we're open to that reciprocity, then I think this is an exciting opportunity for us. Through the chair.
Thank you. And just as we wrap up the questions and comments, I just want to provide an opportunity to our Indigenous lead, Jolene John. Is there anything further that you wanted to add in response to the comments that you've heard or the questions?
Through the chair, I would just like to say and extend my sincere gratitude and, thanks to the Board of Trustees for taking seriously this report and for your, what it seems like, commitment to endorse these action items and to see them through. And thank you to Director Métis for also supporting the working in parallel. And that's all. Now, Goa and Donato, through the chair.
Thank you. So to the motion to approve the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Community Advisory Committee report, is anyone opposed? Hearing none, that passes. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 10, our Rural Schools Advisory Committee report from April the 7th, 2021. Trustee Tutt, would you like to bring forward the report? Trustee Tutt?
Madam Chair, bear with me. I'm experiencing some technical difficulties on my end.
Sure. If it would help, I can ask someone else to bring forward the report. I think perhaps
I was in attendance.
Trustee Johnson.
You want me to help? You want me to help? You want me to help you, Paul?
Thanks.
Sure, I would be open to.
Okay. So, Trustee Johnstone, you were in attendance. If you wouldn't mind bringing forward the report, that would be helpful. Thank you. And thanks for the offer, Trustee Mulholland.
Thank you, through the chair. So the Rural Schools Committee last met April 7th. As trustees can see, there is action item A. So with that regard, the committee received rural schools funding and rural schools designation review. So part of the discussion included a discussion took place that some of the schools that have representation on the committee no longer may no longer meet the designation for rural schools as per the ministry's criteria, while others may actually qualify and meet the eligibility to have representation on this committee. As such, the Rural Schools Advisory Committee recommends, A, that the board undertake a review of the existing designated rural schools list using ministry criteria with input from Planning, Facilities Management, Health and Safety, and HWDSB Superintendents of Student Achievement. B, that the report and recommendations be brought to the Rural Schools Advisory Committee at the first meeting planned for 2021-2022 school year. And C, that the board submit to the Ministry of Education for consideration of additions and reductions of schools to the Rural Schools and Northern Education Fund. So at this point, Madam Chair, would you like me to continue with the remainder of the report with information items, or would you like to vote on this item?
If you can just bring forward the full report, and then we'll go to questions and vote. Thank you.
Absolutely. So trustees will also see information items. So we had item B, updates with regards to facilities, health and safety, water and transportation. Under facilities, trustees will note there was an update with regards to Belmore's Child Care Center, which is under construction and will be completed approximately June 2021, opening for September. Mount Hope is scheduled to have the remainder of its roof replaced, and that work will begin early April. Trustees will also note under health and safety, Greensville continues to have their water tested monthly. There's no concerns. With no concerns. Drinking water fixtures, however, are still bagged and tagged and out of service, and water bottles are available while they're waiting for the engineer's evaluation report. Once that report is received, bottled water will discontinue, and it's expected to be received soon. The committee also received a report with regards to transportation and the bell time changes. With that was a conversation that with the bell time changes, there will be more consistent and dependable transportation service, that the changes impact both the public and Catholic board. Changes will take place this September, and the board is working with child care providers on adjusting providing support to suggest programs to accommodate the bell changes. Other business, so there was a discussion with regards to COVID-19 transition update, and there was quite a packed meeting, but I'm going to highlight that we had a brilliant presentation from Michelle Rodney Bartolos, who is Assistant Principal of Equity, and she provided a in-depth and brilliant presentation on Learn, Disrupt, Rebuild. And herein lies my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Johnstone. So the report has an action item, so it would be a motion to approve the report, moved by Trustee Johnstone, seconded by Trustee Tutt. I'll go to Trustees. We do have an action item, so I'll just go through the roll call in reverse order this time. Student Trustee Zakar, did you have any questions or comments? Student Trustee Zakar?
Sorry again. No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Tutt?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Mulholland?
No comments through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Johnson, sorry I didn't give you a chance to provide any comments. Did you have any comments? Or?
No, I attended the meeting and brought forward the report, but thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
No comments or questions.
Thanks. Trustee Dees?
Thank you. And to the chair, in regards to the rural schools designation review, so those schools that will perhaps no longer be designated as rural schools, what's the impact on them? To the chair.
We'll go to the director.
So thank you through the chair to Trustee Dees, and I'll ask either Superintendent McPherson or Associate Director Zucker, who might add more if I have captured it. As a former superintendent of schools, what I would know right now that the greatest impact on rural schools in terms of this recommendation is really the funding that we get allocated based on the ministry's definition of rural schools. So as you can see in the report, that the budget amount we receive from the ministry, I'll have Associate Director Zucker confirm, is $90,583. So if schools are removed from that list, in regards to this report, the only impact I see is that we would potentially lose some funding. Now, when you speak to rural schools, there's broader issues. When we talk about our rural schools in our community and transportation, et cetera. But when it comes to this report, I believe the only impact would be this amount of funding, because I don't believe we're funded any other way based on this designation. But I'll ask Associate Director Stacey Zucker to confirm or add to what I have said.
Associate Director Zucker?
Sorry, thank you, and through the chair. When we receive the funding from the ministry based on their definition, not based on the board's definition. So that the funding based on the ministry's definition shouldn't change. That being said, there are possibly schools that are receiving the funding currently that are not represented on the Rural Schools Committee and vice versa. So I think that would be the significant change, not necessarily a change in funding, just a change in who would attend the rural schools meetings based on our definition. But I would think that Superintendent McPherson would have a better idea of the attendance at the committee. Thank you.
Superintendent McPherson, did you have anything to add?
Thank you. And through the chair, I know that this had been raised after our last rural schools report was presented to board. In particular, it had come up that we had a school Flamborough Centre, which was not on the list. We had done some homework behind the scenes to find out whether or not Flamborough Centre had ever been designated as a rural school. In 2018, it was not designated as such. And then also looking at the different schools that now are no longer as rural, that now have libraries in the area, etc. This is where this recommendation came forward.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham?
No questions, but comment with this conversation around the rural schools and definitions. I recall the same conversation happening with one of the last pupil accommodations that we did, and there was a question, big question around the definitions of rural schools. So this is all very familiar, but at the same time, as Associate Director Zucker said, if it's not changing in the funding, then I'm good with all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've gone to the speakers list. Is anyone opposed to approving the Rural Schools Advisory Committee report? Hearing none, we'll move to our next item, reports from staff. Item 11 is our school reopening COVID-19 update number 11, and not really reopening update, but a COVID-19 update. I'll turn to the director to get us started and remind trustees that there is a presentation that was sent by email this evening, so if you want to open that, that will help us follow along.
So thank you. Through the chair, there is a PDF presentation for our verbal update that was sent to trustees later this afternoon by Trustee Officer Miller. I'll give trustees just an opportunity to open it up. And I will be beginning on page 2 to highlight the updates this evening. We're going to provide an update on some feedback from families, students, and staff. Also, an update on public health measures and targeted testing that's been expanded. Also around learning in person that is occurring at this time. Update on our secondary schools, an update on our elementary schools, an update on human resources, staff absences, and redeployment, which has shifted this month due to a shift to remote for most students. And then a director's update from Ministry and Code Council of Directors of Education conversations. Then I have a final slide around some of our next steps, and where monitoring will continue in other reports in other committees. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Associate Director Peter Sobin.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'll just do a quick sound check, Chair.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, trustees, and there will be a number of members of Executive Council providing the brief update this evening. I will begin on slide 3, which is our feedback update. Typically, this is where we would have provided an update on various thought exchange surveys. However, as you'll see in the slide, our Research and Analytics Department has entered into a partnership with the McMaster Child and Youth University and the Hamilton Community Foundation to launch a research initiative. As a result of this, the planned thought exchange that was scheduled for April has been suspended as the data will be collected through this research. And as noted in this update, that the initial sample will be only from those who are enrolled in the remote learning program for now. And this is in order to really minimize some of the impact that we have already been seeing on the system, some fatigue in terms of surveys, and acknowledging that we have 2 other very significant survey initiatives coming out shortly, the Student Census and the MDI. So being mindful of that, we will be gathering feedback through this research partnership and providing it at a future update. I'm going to turn to slide 4 and ask Superintendent Romano to provide updates around public health measures and testing.
Thank you, Peter. Can I just check in with Chair Danko? Is the sound clear, Chair Danko?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start this evening just with a comment in terms of our continued collaboration and problem solving with public health. This is a true partnership that has been ongoing. 3 formal meetings a week occur with public health. And then, of course, we respond to each time public health reaches out to us with a case conference and any positive cases. And, of course, those can occur during the day, in the evenings, and in the weekend. So, again, a partnership that we truly value as we navigate COVID together. Our concentration the last 2 weeks really has been on our students who are returning face-to-face and our staff returning face-to-face. Peggy will be outlining some more detailed information on that particular group. But from a public health perspective, the focus was on an attestation. So again, a review of the last 10 days to ensure that folks coming back were symptom-free. And we've continued support through a daily active screening process for both students in elementary and secondary. And that can occur electronically. In some cases, it occurs in a booklet form that goes back and forth between home and school. Our daily active screening continues for our staff. That is a very big, important part of public health measures. Again, through the leadership of Matthew Kwan, we were able to go through some refreshers and some initial training to support those staff who were returning to sites last week. Again, we wanted to be have those public health measures reviewed and ensure that they were being executed effectively. We do have the ongoing support from our own Health and Safety Committee, looking at school visits occurring to monitor the implementation of measures and to support principals to ensure that those are being done properly. At this point in time, public health will be reaching out to us and communicating cases of staff and students who are attending in person only. So those case conferences will continue. And ongoing communication will occur between our own COVID response team and public health daily. We're still awaiting the revised operational guidance document from the ministry, and that, of course, will inform preparations for September around public health and safety measures. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, sorry. You've got the PDF in front of you. I'm just going to turn now to asymptomatic targeted testing. So this, again, continues to be a focus of the ministry as an important part of the enhanced measures, and data is collected regularly by the ministry on the asymptomatic testing sites. We are following, at this point in time, a hub model, which means we invite a secondary school with all feeder schools connected to that secondary school. We have made a few adjustments as we go into this week to add other schools. That makes sense maybe because of geography or other reasons. In order for us to determine the clinics, we have depended on the public health data. They've been able to provide us with COVID case rates, positivity rates, as well as testing rates. So our current hub model basically is an overlay of the public health data that has informed where sites need to occur. In total, since we started, 14 clinics have occurred. That is as of this week. Clinics are planned for this week as well as the week of May 3rd. And you can see the number of staff and students that have been invited to date. Now, that's a very large number, 48,626. But again, keep in mind, each site, each hub model, we invite all staff and students from the secondary school as well as the feeder schools. To date, 1,449 tests have been completed and 8 positive cases as of the end of March have been determined. We are still waiting results of April clinics. We are still working through Life Labs and have been very happy with the way that they have been running the clinics to date. We'll continue to work closely both with public health and the ministry to determine future sites for asymptomatic testing. I'm going to go to the next page and just outline an update for you where we're at in terms of cases and outbreaks. A reminder that an outbreak is called when public health is able to confirm through their lab that in a school we've had an FE link within a 14-day period where one case could be, with reasonable certainty, connected to another case in a school. So when we have that link between two cases, that becomes an outbreak. In February, you can see our total 55 cases with one outbreak. March, that number rose to 242 cases, 10 outbreaks. And up until the slide here says data as of April 22nd, we actually didn't have cases on the weekend, so the data is actually current as of today. We've had 213 cases and 7 outbreaks. Again, I need to acknowledge the incredible team that meets with public health and responds to the cases as public health puts them on the table. So Matthew Kwan, Jeff Gillies, Amber Aqueen, Sean McKillop, Rob Faulkner, Lisa Kirkopoulos, Lori Stacy, and Kelly Stewart. Those folks are at the table during the day, in the evenings, and on the weekends. Again, we respond to public health when they reach out to us to indicate they have a positive case. I am happy to report that this time we have no outbreaks in HWDSB. I will now pass it to Peggy to take us to the next slide.
Thank you, Laura, and good evening, trustees. Chair Denko, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So I'm on the next slide, and as you know, the Ministry of Education issued a memo on April 16th, the evening of April 16th, about in-person learning for students that would be have greater special education requirements and that would be at risk if they did not engage in in-person learning. This is a very small number of students. In advance of students entering last week and this week, we followed the ministry memo and put another process in place of seeking additional input, not only from the principals, but the classroom teachers of students. Then these professionals had communication with parents of these young people. So that you can see in front of you that we have 3 face-to-face in-person learning scenarios that are soon to be underway. Self-contained classes started last Thursday, and the students that are attending, in total the number is 264. In January, you may recall that we ran in-person learning sessions in 6 school sites across the board for half day of learning. And we are running those sites, but at 5 locations. And these are elementary students, could be up to grade 8, and again, really benefit and require in-person learning. And there are 81 students who will be attending beginning Wednesday of this week. Then in secondary schools, we have 9 students, some of whom have started, that will be attending in person. And again, the bottom 2 bullets, these students would be placed in regular classrooms, but require significant support. So in the chart below, you will see the direct type of staffing that's required. So school-based staff, if there is in-person learning, it could be principal or vice principal, could be an office administrator in the building, but for sure teachers and educational assistants. System-based staff, so staff of specialized services, could include, for example, our teachers, our system learning resource teachers or Excel teachers, and a variety of different people in roles such as board-certified behavior analysts, speech-language pathologists, communicative disorders assistants, child and youth care practitioners, and some of our system educational assistants. In addition to board staff, some of our young people require support such as nursing, so it could be that a nurse is present, an occupational therapist, or a physiotherapist, for example, from Ron Joyce, and nursing staff is provided through the LIN, the Local Health Integration Network. Again, a very small number of students. Some of the other things that we've taken into consideration, again, is the transportation, working with facilities on determining whether there are additional HEPA filters that might be helpful, and, of course, collaborating with Laura, Matthew, and team on ensuring that those public health measures are in place and that the staff are aware of them. Going to the next slide, we also have something called Education and Community Partnership Programs, and some of you will know them as CTCC programs, or Care, Treatment, Custody, and Correction programs. But the Education and Community Partnership programs, we're very fortunate to run in the board, and the young people that access these programs are not considered students of the board, but the board does provide the classroom teacher. So we have a partnership agreement with a number of agencies, and so some of the children require things like they may be accessing the program and are students of the board because they have significant mental health requirements or physical or medical needs. So, for example, one of our programs is at McMaster, and so students there would be getting some form of support. It could be in largely medical or treatment. So we have a number of programs, and of the programs that we have currently, there would be 56 students attending in collaboration with the partners and our staff that support these programs. Some of the programs have decided to keep their young people, and so they would be engaged in remote learning. And so, again, a very small number of students that currently are receiving in-person learning. These numbers for education, community, and community partnership programs could change because there's often continuous intake or students leave on a regular basis. So it could be one or the other. So the numbers, again, could vary from what you're seeing in front of you. So thank you, and I'll hand over to Associate Director Sylvan. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Blair, and through the chair, I am on slide 9. So under secondary schools, the rotational model, just by way of updates, we have made a slight change to the rotational model so that we have a day 1 and a day 2 schedule. This is in order to preserve as much in-person, and there's a typo there, in-person learning opportunities as much as possible should there be a return to the adaptive mode. The 4-period structure still remains the same, 150 minutes in the morning with 3 50-minute periods in the afternoon. Student success days will once again replace the exam days at the end of the semester. And just an update around graduations. Last time we did provide an update that graduation ceremonies would be moved to a walkthrough or a drive-through type of scenario. However, we wanted to let you know that graduation signs that are school-specific are also being ordered and will be ready for distribution soon. I'm going to move to slide 10 and just provide some updates for elementary schools. The May transition at this time, since we are under the provincial order to be fully remote, the transition that was originally scheduled for May is currently on pause. However, preparations will continue should we require the transition to occur at a later time. And then just by way of update again around remote learning for next school year, should we find ourselves continuing to have a response to the pandemic, planning is occurring now. As was reported at the last program committee, a dual-track model embedded into schools is one that we are pursuing now. But the next step will be to fully engage with our labor partners on this. So with that, I'm going to turn to Superintendent McPherson to go through slide 11 and some specific updates around elementary schools and grade 8 graduation.
Thank you. We have had an elementary grade 8 grad advisory committee that has been working over the past couple of months. Similar to the work that has been done by the secondary committee, we recognize that within Ontario's zones for public health, traditional large-scale graduations are not possible for June 2021. However, the committee has established options to celebrate and honor our graduates while also ensuring safety and public health measures are strictly followed.
Left.
Two options have been developed depending on the COVID zone that we find ourselves in during the month of June. The first option would be if schools remain closed to in-person learning and students are learning remotely. And the second option is if students are able to return in person. So option one, if our students are fully remote, it would be very similar to the PowerPoint presentation that was shared last year with our graduates. The PowerPoint presentation would include messages from director, chair, SOSAs, and trustees, and school-created content. So, for example, things like student baby photos, student-created messaging, staff greetings, and awards. Very important as well that we will be including our remote learning program students, as we recognize that this is a huge milestone for them, as much as they have been in remote for a portion or even for all of this school year. These are students that have been attached to their home schools for a number of years. We want to ensure that they are able to celebrate with their peers. Option two is for if we return to in-school, there will be two components. And once again, making sure that we include our remote learning program students in this. The first component would be an in-school graduation experience. And what that would be by class cohort. And during the instructional day, unfortunately, we cannot have outside guests for this component. It would give students the opportunity to walk the stage with their classmates and to be celebrated by their educators. With this component, we would also provide a PowerPoint presentation, and schools would have the option of including a video or photos of the students walking the stage into that PowerPoint presentation. Remote classes, unfortunately, those students would not be able to join this component. However, they are already making plans that they would host their own online class celebrations. The second component to this option would be the outdoor graduate celebration, very similar to what you've already heard for secondary. It would be by appointment after school, and families would be welcome to join this as well. Students would work through stations, so they would be able to pick up their diplomas. They would perhaps have a photo station where they could have a snapshot taken of them. There could be a spirit wear station, award station, and a graduation sign station, etc. For this component, the remote learning program students who are attached to that home school would be most welcome to join and could come out and have that option as well. And I'll also add here, the grade 8 graduates also will be receiving a sign, the same design as has been put together for secondary, so they will be receiving those as well. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jamie Nunn.
Thank you, and through the chair. Happy to bring forward a report in regards to human resources and staff absences. As Superintendent Romano had shared earlier in the presentation this evening, With the increase in the number of cases that were identified within the community and within our schools, it did correspond to an increase in the number of daily absences of our employees. And we continued from within the first 2 weeks of April, we continued to have unfilled positions across all of our employee groups as a result. We've shared here on the screen a summary of our daily absences and the percentage of absences that regrettably were unfilled on average per week, and the percentage of absences that were related to an employee who was recording an absence related to COVID-19. On average, within the first 2 weeks of April, every day we had more than 800 staff recording an absence, and 20% of these absences went unfilled, considering the demand on our occasional group. Relative following the spring break and our pivot to remote learning, trustees will see there has been a significant decrease in the number of average daily absences, and certainly we have for the last week and a half been able to successfully fulfill all of those vacancies as they have been entered. Over the last 2 weeks, and certainly the pivot to remote learning, both employee support and wellness and staffing and operations have been working individually with staff to accommodate any family status accommodation requests as they receive them, and certainly supporting staff with the option of emergency child care as is provided by the City of Hamilton. I'll turn to the Director for the next part of tonight's update.
So through the Chair, on slide 13, want to provide some high-level updates that we're still waiting for in discussions with the Ministry. We're still waiting for the revised operational guidance document for September startup. April is the target date, so we're still in April, and we hope that we will receive it, which will direct our planning. However, behind the scenes, staff is still planning, like we did for this September, scenario A, B, and C, and we look forward to this document. As well, there's remote virtual learning for Ontario is being discussed with Code, and I know also with chairs, and there is a Ontario Public School Board Association provincial survey that was shared with directors that we were informed today as directors that would be coming to a student survey to gather the student voice around remote learning, although we've gathered some of this voice locally already through our thought exchanges. We were told this was coming, and Ministry continues to tell us that they are still consulting on this matter. GSN and our partnership priority funding, as trustees learned through Associate Director Stacey Zucker at Finance Facilities, we are still told that this is coming the month of April. As early as today, we heard that it is coming soon, and we hope that it does meet the April target date, because that is so instrumental in us planning for our budget for next school year. Vaccination plan as well, as trustees know, we're in phase 2. We have provided over 2,000 letters to staff and continue to review staff who are required to come into schools during this phase to support, and we've provided additional letters for staff who were not included in our first distribution of letters, in particular our office administrators who are required to be in at this time. And lastly, I've highlighted before our summer learning opportunities. Staff is planning around our summer learning opportunities, and the funding is coming in for that, and there will be, as the memo states now, an option for a hybrid model of some in person and some remote, but we know that can change month to month. And my last slide is just a highlight of where we'll continue to provide trustees with updates in our Positive Culture Wellbeing Report, going to Program Committee in June. We'll provide an update at that time again around social work referrals, student attendance. Again, total attendance support report. We'll give more details through HR Committee. and staff attendance as related to COVID-19 impact, and student achievement report. The program committee, June, will provide another update on student progress, and through the leadership of Associate Director Stacey Zucker, through Finance and Facilities, that is ongoing, and will provide any updates of our COVID-19 related costs through that structure. That is our verbal update this evening. I know it was a lot of information, but there was some new information that we thought was vital that trustees became aware of as a result of the most recent shift to remote and to see some of our planning for May and June. Through the chair.
Thank you for that comprehensive yet concise report, and to all the staff and senior leadership who helped bring that forward. So I'll go through the roll call to see if there are questions. I'm going to go in reverse order. I have to give people a moment to prepare to see if you have any questions. I want to recognize Student Trustee Zakar had to leave at about 7, and so I'll start with Trustee Tutt.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Mulholland?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
Hi, just a quick comment through the chair. Thank you for highlighting how we are supporting staff who are currently still in person with our students. I know that I've heard from a few community members that that this is still, a very important and that, requires us to keep them in mind, that they are still our frontline workers. And while the rest of the system is in remote instruction, there are many of our staff and our community members who are still going into work every day and, being exposed. So I just wanted to highlight that in the report. But otherwise, I don't have any specific questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
Thank you. Through the chair, I guess I'll just ask the first question. Have we received a response yet from our letter to Public Health, getting clarification around the decision-making process? I'll start with that. Have we had a response from Public Health yet?
Thank you. The letter was sent out. It was mid to late last week, and we are looking forward to a response, but we have not received one yet.
Okay. My next question is just with regards to the section on COVID cases and outbreaks. I recall last time I'd requested if we could have some information with regards to if there is any overlap between our high priority schools and where we're seeing cases and outbreaks, if there's a pattern or perhaps there's none. But have we been able to look at that data at all?
To the Director?
Yes, through the chair. We don't have it here provided tonight, but I can tell you when we did a review, if there's been more outbreaks connected to our outbreaks, our high priority schools, or more positive cases, we did not see a trend in that, but we can take that away and provide it next month's report. But there wasn't one at this point.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for looking at that. Appreciate that. And if we can get the information for the next report, that would be great, just so we can share that with the community and be transparent. With regards to the Student Learning and Achievement Report that's coming in June, I'm just concerned with it coming so late. I know that's usually when, I guess, just our ability to make any changes as needed. So are we able to, do we have concerns around currently, because I know that staff, our exec council meets with our school principals, and our school principals are meeting routinely with their staff teams. and identifying the needs of each school, but are we concerned that we will see a drop in grad rates or victory laps? Are we concerned with absenteeism? Are we concerned with whether our students are maintaining, continuing to work towards our student learning and achievement goals regarding mathematics and reading? I know we don't have the data in front of us right now, but I'm wondering if there's, if information's being considered currently and what's being done with that information, just because I know I certainly have concerns around student learning and achievement as I see lots of parents commenting online how it's an ongoing struggle to keep their children engaged or monitoring the work, and so I know families are reporting a real struggle there. So I'm just curious if we could have a little bit more feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I'll just highlight that while trustees get reports at specific times in the year with data, we know that our staff are continually monitoring and responding as things emerge. But I'll turn to the director to start us off with a response. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll begin, then I'll ask Associate Director Peter Sofern to add, and thank you to Trustee Johnstone for her question. So, like last semester, we looked at our secondary semester 1 progress reports, and those are coming now semester 2 to us to track again which students are we potentially concerned with. And what we noticed in semester 1 that we had to really put some student success interventions in place, and our progress data was lower than it typically has been, and then by the end of semester 1 the gains were made. But we did also flag that the group that we were also concerned about were our students in grade 9 who we were noticing that their progress was not aligned to their previous cohort. So that's a group we continue to focus on through student success. And another piece we're focusing on monitoring, and we just met with our administrators today, we'll be doing some follow-up, is around our grade 1 reading and potentially grade 2, the students that we were concerned about last spring because of remote. And Trustee Johnson is correct that our greatest other concern is continuous engagement through this, as we know that we hear about pandemic fatigue, remote fatigue. So that is an area that we continue to make sure that we're trying to find different ways to engage students, especially during this period of remote. And the uncertainty right now is we don't have any direction, when this period will end. But that's the two data sets we're continuing to focus on is around our students engaging and attending, as it relates to our reading results and graduation results. But I'll ask Associate Director Peter Sofern to add any more information at this point in time.
Thank you, Director. And through the Chair, all I will add is that I will echo Trustee Johnstone's comments that the work continues between students and teachers in their classrooms, in their remote settings, that support is provided by our school principals and vice principals, and monitoring does continue, and support through our superintendents of student achievement. That is an ongoing process throughout. It occurred before the pandemic. It continues to occur now, both when we were in person and now in remote. By way of reports, we do bring reports to trustees, as Chair Danko has indicated, once we have a consistent data set that we can provide an analysis to trustees. But I do want to emphasize again that although we're not bringing forward a report based on that data, that the day-to-day work continues, that engagement is still a top priority. And I do want to acknowledge the tremendous work that our staff are doing each and every day as they engage with their students in their classes.
Thank you. I have two follow-up questions. So the first one is concerned that we're in unique situations, and normally I believe the process is 2 weeks for a student to be absent before we escalate it up to additional resources, whether that be social work or CAS, etc. Because we're in such a unique time, are we still following our normal processes, or are we using any kind of expedited process in terms of when to apply additional resources, whether social work, mental health, alerts, CAS, etc.? So can you comment on that?
To the Director.
So I'll begin through the Chair. One thing we review every week at school operations are any emerging issues, because the province has provided some COVID-19 funds for us to address emerging issues. And through those emerging issues, we have provided some additional social work support or additional reallocation of resources that we may need depending on where the need is. But I'll just say that's the resource that we've been using. And in addition, through trustees supporting the use of reserves, when we did do our transition in February, we added additional staff to keep class sizes as low as possible, not only for safety, but to lower the numbers so then there could be more attention when students were shifting from either remote to in person. We also added some staff to remote to lower some class sizes. So those are just two examples. We'll ask Associate Director Peter Sobin if he has more examples to reference.
Thank you, Director. I think you've captured it. And all I will add again is that, as we've indicated in our previous reports, our referrals to our social workers have continued throughout both the in-person and remote. And certainly there hasn't been at any time a particular given amount of time that would need to expire before a referral is made. If there's a concern about a student, then a referral is made.
Thank you for that. And then my final, I guess, kind of note is, and I'll just start by saying thank you to staff. So certainly our Exec Council for your leadership, your ongoing diligence in this area and concern and work here, as well as to thank you to all of our staff across the system, to our families who are supporting students at home. I do want to note that I guess twofold. So one, I'm hearing that our students are likely doing better because of the investments made last August. And I'm noting that primarily to my fellow trustees. So the smaller class sizes has certainly had a positive impact on our student learning and achievement. I think that when we have the report coming to us in June, it's going to be really important to highlight what our concerns are as a system, where gaps have taken place, and what the additional funding and resources have been involved in order to address those concerns along the way. I think that it's really important as a board that we make a powerful case to the ministry that our student learning and achievement, that we were in a better position because of the investments made through our board last summer. B, that we, despite this enormous efforts that we made and significant efforts that we made, we still have gaps and concerns. And B or C, that has required additional resources. I think it's really important for the ministry to know all that it has taken and will continue to take in order to get our students up to an optimal level so that they do not learn out or lose out on any portion of their education. I think that I'm very concerned when I'm hearing from the ministry that it's going to be back to status quo for the GSMs that are coming up, that we're going to be resuming normal class sizes, that we're going to be resuming, I guess, previous pre-COVID supports and resources when our school board has already identified concerns previously in our last Student Learning and Achievement report, that we continue to take action to apply resources to ensure that our students are supported through social work, through learning resource teachers, through specialists in order to get our reading up, in order to get our grad rates to where they're supposed to be reaching out to students who have disconnected. That all costs money and resources, and it's wrong to assume that we'll be back to status quo for September. And when I'm talking about a recovery budget, a recovery mentality, that's exactly what I'm going after. And I think that when we see the Student Learning and Achievement Report come to us in June, I hope that it will cover those three areas: what we've done, what we're currently doing, and what's on the horizon, so that we can make that very important case to the ministry, because without data, there's no compelling reason for them to do anything else. So I'll close with those comments tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any comments or questions at this time.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Just a couple of little questions. The first one is in regards to the new rotational, because I did get some correspondence with students struggling with some of the changes to the secondary, the new rotational. So I'm just wondering, I believe what I heard was that it was to give students more class time. Can I just maybe have an expansion on that, please?
Thank you. Through the Director to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. So to your question, Trustee Dees, I will begin and then ask colleagues from Executive Council if they'd like to add. But in terms of looking at the rest of the school year, we were just about to enter into the third rotation, and knowing that the time in which the ministry had indicated that would be fully remote did not have an end date, and which twofold. One is that there may not be an end date in this school year, but the second possibility is that there will be an end date and there will be a return to the adaptive model, in which case then it was thought best that students have an opportunity for both their third rotation and their fourth rotation to have at least a component of in-person learning should we return. So that was one of the reasons. The second reason is that when we did shift to fully remote back in January, we did note that the 150-minute period each day in the morning was quite substantial in terms of having students remain engaged. And so for that reason, it was thought that having a day one and a day two where a different subject is taught for that 150 minutes on the alternate days, that would alleviate some of the engagement and some of the load for our students. So I will pause there. I will ask if Superintendent Ferguson, who's been leading our secondary schools advisory with our principals, vice principals, as well as engaging our labor partners in this, if she would have any comments, or Superintendent Torrens or Superintendent Dunlop, who have also been involved with that advisory.
Through the chair, I can just add one thing to that. It's Superintendent Ferguson, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to add, so each rotation is 22 days, and we were just starting rotation 3. So should the stay-at-home order go for 6 weeks, we could end up with a potential 10 days remaining, and at that point we would divide those between face-to-face time for rotation 3 and then face-to-face time for rotation 4. So it all comes down to how long that stay-at-home order is, but the main driving piece behind that, coming from the committee, was that students would get some hands-on in school time. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
Great, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. And then just one very minor point is when you're talking about graduation, you were talking about a PowerPoint, but wasn't it a video last year, or is that sort of the style that we're using? Knowing, I believe some schools prefer video.
Thank you, Director Figueredo.
So through the chair, I'll pass that to Associate Director Peter Sullivan.
Thank you. And through the chair, could I just seek some clarity, Trustee Dees, my apologies, to this question, so I know who to direct it to, whether it's elementary or were you speaking about secondary?
Trustee Dees?
My apologies, and again, I'm sorry because I know it's minor in the big grander scheme of things, but I'm just trying to look through where the slides where it said. But it just talks about, as in last year, there was a PowerPoint done with, with messages from trustees, director, et cetera. I'm not sure if it was elementary or secondary. And I'm just wondering, and at this time it specifically states a PowerPoint, so I'm just wondering if that's different than last year. I'm trying to find the slide.
Thank you. It's on slide 11 for elementary school grade 8 graduation.
Thank you, and thank you, Trustee Dees. I will ask Superintendent McPherson to respond to this.
Thanks. Happy to provide clarification through the chair. You're correct. The presentation last year, it was a template that was put together by our corporate communications in conjunction with IIT. It will be a similar format this year. It will be, it gives schools the ability to incorporate slides in there for parents to watch. So as much as it is in the form of like a PowerPoint as staff are putting it together, what actually is presented to parents ends up being one continuous presentation. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Trustee Dees, does that answer your question? And it is a video, including video clips as with the slides, as a parent who got to watch one last year.
Yes, thank you. And I just, because I know there's a lot of, it's too bad, and I think everybody understands there's nothing that we can do about the graduations, and I appreciate the team's efforts and all they're doing to try to make these, the best out of a bad situation. But thank you. That does clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bach?
Thank you very much, Chair Danko. Going back to Superintendent Romano's presentation regarding the public health measures, specifically I was wondering about the latest clinics that we've done for asymptomatic testing. I know that we had been having trouble with low attendance at clinics that go further back, and I wondered if she could comment or someone could comment on if the most current clinics, we'd seen any kind of improvement on those numbers.
Thank you. I'll go through the director to Superintendent Romano.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, we have seen a progressive decline since the lockdown of folks coming out to the asymptomatic clinics. The ones last week, there were 3 clinics run last week, and they had the lowest numbers that we've seen. We actually weren't sure what to expect last week. We weren't sure if, in fact, our numbers would go higher or they would lower, but they did lower. So we are looking at pivoting a little bit in terms of gathering potentially more schools as we move forward. So we are looking at the data that we have this week, working together with public health, and that will inform clinics going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
Thank you so much for that information. I wondered if we're seeing this as a useful endeavor. It seems to take a lot of time and resources, and just kind of thinking out loud if this is something that we should continue to pursue, or not really looking for a comment at this time, but just maybe putting it on other people's radar. That's what I'm thinking about. If all of this work is going into making the clinics happen, and we're still not seeing much utilization from those that would be able to participate at each of those sites, if that's the best use of our time. I don't need a comment about it, though, at this time. I was thinking next about the changes to the rotational model, doing the day 1, day 2. Was any consideration given to doing a 4-day rotational model, or does that get a bit more tricky when we factor in that some of our schools actually have 5, that's the word that escaped me, 5 different versus the 4 different breakups in the day, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Through the Director to Associate Director Selvrin.
Thank you. And through the Chair, I will again turn to Superintendent Ferguson for this question, as she was involved with all the various possibilities with the Advisory Committee.
Thank you for the question. Through the Chair, because we've already done Rotation 1 and Rotation 2, those students have had a significant amount of time face-to-face. They've each had 22 days. So that wasn't a consideration in this next part. It was trying to still meet the needs of the Rotation 3 and Rotation 4 cohorts. Thank you.
Trustee Buck?
Thank you very much for that. I'm so sorry I wasn't clear in my question. Thinking ahead to if we needed to continue on with COVID as the determinative of the models that we put out or that we operationalize, should we or would we then consider doing a 4-day rotation versus a 2-day rotation in that instance when you're starting at the beginning of a semester versus in the middle of a semester like we are right now?
And through the Chair. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for that. I'll just respond to that in that that certainly could be a consideration if we would be in this situation at the start of September, for example. And I do know that Advisory Committee will be reflecting on where we're at as far as our COVID protocols and rules, and then may adapt given the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
Okay, thank you very much for that answer, Superintendent Ferguson. I just had one more question about the dual-track model for under the pandemic remote learning. I'm sorry, I don't know the slide number, but for the elementary schools. I was hoping to get a bit more clarity. When could we, on our end, say that we're committed to enacting the dual-track model for the 2021-22 school year, or is this completely dependent on the ministry and any mandate that they give us for the coming school year.
Thank you. Director Figueiredo?
So thank you. Through the chair and to Trustee Buck. So there's two things. One, this model came to trustees at the program committee and then to board last Monday, and the report program committee was approved. But this planning is based on the assumption that we have to have a remote option due to the pandemic. The second thing we're waiting for is the revised operational guidance document for September 2021-22 school year that the ministry said would come by the month of April, because we have indicated that we need to be more proactive in our planning, and if there's any nuances or learnings the province has done regarding any of the models, that they're going to be reflected in this revised guidance document. So the decision right now is based on the assumptions and the verbal direction given by the ministry is that we should be planning to have a remote option for the fall of the upcoming school year due to the pandemic. So that's what we're planning now. In terms of long-term, that's the broader consultation that Trustee Johnson brought last week under the OSTA update. That's a broader discussion. Our model here is just to prepare for this fall due to the impact of the pandemic still, which the program committee discussed, I believe, was April 6th, and then the trustees received the report last week on April 19th. So that's the premise we're planning for remote for this upcoming fall. Through the chair.
Thank you. Trustee Buck?
Thank you very much for that, Director Figueiredo. Just one follow-up to that piece. Has the ministry at this point given us any kind of indicator of when they would make their decisions about the coming school year? And I know this is a government that really enjoys kind of giving the last minute, and I would say it creates chaos. So have they indicated that they would give us more of a time frame in which to enact and make sure we've got all of our ducks in a row, versus kind of like the late in announcement that we received last year in August? My gut's telling me no, but I just want to make sure that staff, from staff, if they've heard anything on their end.
Thank you. Director Figueiredo?
Yes, through the chair. They'd indicated by the month of April, this month, that we would get the revised operational guidance document to support us for our September planning, which has been updated a few times this year, but it's the one that we did receive last year, early August, which put a lot of put us in reactive mode to get September startup. So we have been advocating through the chairs with the weekly conversation with the minister and the directors with their biweekly conversations with the deputy minister for the last few months that we need that direction sooner than later so we can plan. And if there's any changes, that we need to know them now so staff can plan the month of May and June, so we can also honor some of the vacation time and downtime that all our staff need this summer. So we're hoping that this month is when we'll receive it, as that's the direction that the Deputy Minister and the Minister of Education has indicated to us. Through the chair.
Thank you. Anything further, Trustee Buck?
Nothing more than just to say how much I appreciate hearing the Director indicate how very needed the break over the summer will be for our staff, as this has been 13 and a half months just of unprecedented, and many of our staff have just been constantly going, and they really do. We need to maintain July and August for them as best as possible, so that they get the rest that they need to come back in September ready to go full throttle again. Anyways, no further questions. Thank you so much for all of the answers tonight.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions, mostly aimed around special needs students that are still in the schools. do we have an actual number of students who require one-on-one still in the schools at this point in time? Because I know we have many special needs students who are not in the schools, but we have kept them open for them. And I'm just wondering if we have that number of how many students need one-on-one support at this point, please.
Thank you. I'll start with the director.
So, through the chair, I will pass that question right through to Superintendent Peggy Blair.
Thank you, and through the chair, appreciate the question, Trustee Bingham. I would suggest that out of the numbers that were presented this evening, almost all of these young people need direct support for a portion of their day. So is it all day? Would it be all day if we were in a more typical, I guess, learning situation? Not always, but many do require that direct intervention, leaning in, almost like a transaction, leaning into the student as required, and then fading back a little bit when not required to the same degree. Some of our young people, as you know, would require hand-over-hand support, and some just need a verbal prompt. But without the verbal prompt of staff, maybe not an educational assistant, but could be, or a teacher, that student would not be able to engage in learning. So to answer your question more directly, I don't have an exact number of the young people that are attending that would get direct support all of the time or require it all of the time, but I would suggest that they all need some level of more direct support. That's the reason for them needing to be in school. And again, some of them, it might be direct support from a nurse, etc., but there is a level of direct support that's required. I'm sorry I can't give you an exact number or percentage of the child's program, but it's pretty significant and direct support.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham?
That's great to even know that, to have those words said very clearly as well. Do those numbers also reflect the students who are at Glenwood School? Would be one of my main. I'm going to assume yes on that, and just kind of couple a question with that so that you can kind of do an answer all at once. And is it all of our schools open, or do we have specific classrooms in some of the schools that have it open for our students who need that special one-on-one time, however amount it is that is needed?
Thank you. Through the director to Superintendent Blair.
Thank you. So yes, the numbers that you see in front of you do reflect students that would attend Glenwood. And not all schools would be open, only the schools where we have one of the three scenarios happening. And it is a significant number of schools, but not all of our schools have one of those three situations happening. So where required, so for example, a self-contained class at Glendale is requiring in-person learning for those young people. That school, of course, would be open. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but please don't. I'll take a follow-up if necessary.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham?
No, that's great. Those are basically the answers that I was hoping to hear. No other questions, but I do want to say thank you to all the staff on behalf of special needs students and their families. This is an extreme time for everyone, but I know firsthand something like this can actually really deter the students from moving forward, even if it's slight. And unless you have a child with special needs or you work with them, most people don't realize this slight that can happen can just slow them down to such a degree. It's like starting all over again. So I really want to say thank you so much to all the staff, from the senior staff understanding this down to the staff who are working directly with them and everyone around them. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you. And that's the end of the speakers list. I do have a couple of questions myself, but I do want to start by echoing the thanks that we've heard for all of our staff, including a thank you to the team who supports case responses for COVID. As we've heard, they're basically on call most of the time. Thank you to our in-person education workers and that are in particularly supporting our special education students with pervasive needs. And thank you to all of our staff who are doing their best to support our students and families in remote learning, which we know is not ideal for everyone. The one question I did have, or a couple of questions, are related to the case counts. So I'll start with our April cases. We've got 213 highlighted, but I just wanted to confirm those are only cases that are tracked while we are in person. So now that we are in remote learning, only students that are in person, so our special education students that we have listed in the presentation tonight, are being tracked at this point. So the case numbers wouldn't reflect the entire system necessarily. Is that correct, through the director?
Through the chair, there's a transitional period, that is correct, but I'll pass it over to Superintendent Laura Romano to explain that transitional period.
Thank you. And through the chair, you are correct. The cases that you see would be cases that would have occurred while we are in person. We do depend on public health to reach out to us due to confidentiality when there is a positive case. So we are in a waiting period as we wait for them to reach out to us. They will not be reaching out with positive cases unless they know the student, there is impact to our school site, so the student or the staff attended in person. If there's any question at all from their perspective, they will be reaching out to confirm attendance records, for example, for both staff and students, just to ensure that we're creating a safe environment for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was a previous question about looking at our case counts as they relate to our high-priority schools to continue to look for trends. So I just want to confirm that during the next period in remote, that would be challenging, as we're not necessarily going to see all cases associated with families or staff in our schools if they're in remote. Through the director to Superintendent Romano.
That would be correct. I can say in terms of trends, Director Figueredo was correct. There are no stark trends that we see in the data at all. So, for example, in the April data, out of the 7 outbreaks, we only had 1 at a high-priority school.
Thank you. And one other question with regards to our process for communicating cases to families. I did get a few questions about the timing of letters going to families, and I was wondering if you could just confirm if a family is receiving a letter later in what would be the isolation period, and it seems that there's been a delay in getting the letter from when a positive case might have been first, when it might have first happened. Can you just clarify what the process is in terms of when we receive something from public health and when things get communicated out from our end to families? Through the director to Superintendent Romano.
Yes. So essentially what happens from a process point of view is public health will reach out to us as soon as they're able to work through the case. You can see the numbers in March and April are significantly higher. So certainly there has been a more delayed response from public health at times. They work as efficiently as possible. In some cases, there may be unique situations. So, for example, if someone was asymptomatic and then tested positive, then that really does change the narrative in terms of what public health is looking for a period of communicability. It could be later in the process. It could be earlier in the process. If there are any specific questions, Chair Danko, about individual situations, happy to take that away and work closely with public health, as we're always looking to improve the process. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have two other questions. One question is about, or one comment about graduation. So I really appreciate that we're continuing to do our best to plan for graduations in a difficult time and looking at options depending on our scenario. I just wanted to say thank you to staff. I'm happy to hear about the graduation signs that are school specific. I think that is one of the important ways that we can celebrate our graduates and make that visible. My question is around planning for 2021-22 and having potentially dual track remote learning associated with home schools. I was just curious if we've explored how exactly that would work based on if we had the current number of students in remote. I would expect them to be, the same level or less for September. I guess we can't predict. But how would that work in terms of filling a full class for grade 8 or grade 7? Would that result in three-way splits? I'm just curious how that would work for particularly smaller schools. To the director.
So thank you for the question. I'll pass it on to Associate Director Peter Sullivan.
Thank you. And through the chair, I will actually ask Superintendent Torrens, as he's been working very closely on this together with Superintendent Nunn.
Thank you, Associate Director. And through the chair, just confirming that I can be heard.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Ultimately, the answer to the question begins with parents' interest in having their children attend remote learning. When we have an understanding of where, how many students and from what school communities those students are coming from, that'll allow us to identify how many schools will require to be dual track remote and in-person learning, and will allow us then, like our French immersion model, to have, we haven't created the terminology, a magnet or a cluster school that will house a number of classrooms and then draw from students in surrounding schools. So that work needs to happen once we begin the process of surveying parents for their interest, identifying where families come from, which school communities, as I mentioned, and then we will allocate classrooms to schools.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I have no further questions, so at this time, we can move along to item number 12, which is a report from Standing Committee from April 19th, 2021. Vice Chair Galindo, would you like to bring forward the report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to bring the Standing Committee report from April 19th, 2021. So that was just last week. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. There were no declarations of conflict of interest at this meeting. The first item was a report from staff with regards to the school year calendar for the 2021-2022 school year. Staff presented the report, and Trustee Miller, the Standing Committee recommends that the draft 2021-2022 school year calendar be approved for submission to the Ministry of Education, and that was carried unanimously. We also made two major decisions on the naming of two school sites. The first one was with regards to Collegiate Avenue. On the motion of myself, seconded by Trustee Bingham, the Standing Committee recommends that the recommended action be approved and that the new school be named Collegiate Elementary School. That was carried unanimously as well. With regards to the Glen site, after some debate on the motion of Trustee Mulholland, seconded by Trustee Johnstone, the Standing Committee recommends that the new school be named Viola Desmond Elementary School, and that is for the Glen site. That was also carried unanimously. And the final report of that meeting was an update on the Safe Schools with regards to mapping out community support So staff's provided a Safe Schools update to trustees. Consultations have been taking place regarding how to address certain gaps that have been identified. Now, consultations have been delayed due to the pandemic, but a final report will be coming to trustees in June of this year. And on the motion of Trustee Tutt, seconded by Trustee Miller, the Standing Committee recommends that the updated report be received. And that concludes my presentation. Submitted respectfully. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So the Standing Committee reports moved to be approved by Trustee Galindo, seconded by Trustee Mulholland. And I'll go to trustees. Again, we have action items, so I'll do a roll call in regular order from A to Z. Trustee Bingham, do you have any comments or questions?
No comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bach?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dees?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo, did you have any comments?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Johnstone?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Miller?
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Mulholland?
No comments.
Thank you. Trustee Tutt?
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one comment that I was asked to bring forward, and it's just with respect to the naming of the Glen site. I did hear through the ward trustee who sent regrets for tonight, and from a couple of community members, some disappointment, not with respect to the names that are coming forward, but losing the reference to Glen in the neighborhood, as that's been a long-standing part of the neighborhood. And one person, and I was asked by the ward trustee to just mention this, that one person had thought it would have been nice to consider Glenn Mallory as a name as the founder and conductor of the Hamilton Philharmonic Youth Orchestra. However, we have a recommendation before us, and I will be supporting that. So at this time, to the motion to approve the Standing Committee report, is anyone opposed? Hearing none, that passes. Thank you. I just need to find the correct paper. Next, we have oral reports. For item A, our student trustees asked if we could defer the report to the May board meeting, so we'll move past that. The director has provided most of his report, but I'll just turn to the director to see if there's any additions.
I'll just add one thing, thank you, through the chair. I just want to reemphasize an important piece of work through our Equity Action Plan. One of our commitments around data collection, integration, and reporting was to collect and report identity-based employee data, which we did 2 years ago. And our commitment to this year, even though we are in remote, we are still committing to this important work of collecting and reporting student identity-based data. I want to thank many people through our research department, our equity department, and our consultation with advisory committee, Superintendent Stella Jones, and also consultation support through McMaster University through this work. This is critical work that will begin May. We've had some community engagement sessions, some challenging questions coming our way, and again, it's really emphasizing the why behind it, and there's really two reasons. The one, there's not the most compelling for me, but there is a compliance piece under the Anti-Racism Act of 2017 that all institutions need to collect such data, and institutions from the health sector to police to Children's Aid as example, but also school boards, and all school boards are expected to collect this data by 2023. But the more compelling reason for me is the why behind this, is that we need to critically look at which students are achieving, which students are not achieving, although we have had many stories and narratives being shared by our Indigenous, racialized, and Black community around education not meeting their needs, and some of the barriers that are put in the way. And we've heard their story. So at times very frustrating for these communities to feel that the data needs to be collected to be validated. but I think it's important to put in front why it's critical for us to use this information very sensitively, because at times we need to be trusted with this, and what we do with this information, how we act will be critical. And I think I'll close with the patterns and trends that emerge from this data are a result of us, the school board. So we need to really look at the patterns and trends that emerge from this key data set and who's disproportionately represented in certain data sets, and ask ourselves, what are we going to do differently to change the trajectory here? So there'll be a communication from myself again tomorrow, supported by communications to the community, based on questions that I've received around the why we're doing this. And to me, the most compelling why is to really understand who our students are and what we need to do differently to make sure that equity of access and outcomes are provided to all our students. So that's my update this evening, and more information will come to trustees, as we did add an equity action plan report later this spring to trustees, and then the data will be then analyzed over the summer and then made available and the appropriate actions from that data the fall of 2021 through the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I'll turn to trustees. Are there any questions or comments? If you have any, you can unmute yourself and signal that you'd like to speak. Hearing none, I'll move to the next item, which is the Chair's report. Much of what I was going to mention has already been talked about tonight, so I can keep this brief. I do want to acknowledge that as we're in the third wave of COVID-19, over a year after this all started, and in a place that I certainly didn't imagine we'd be, I want to say a big thank you to our healthcare providers and our healthcare workers who have been working around the clock, and we're hearing more and more that hospitalization rates are what are driving the school closures right now. They're driving provincial decisions right now, and so I do want to extend a thank you also, of course, to our frontline essential workers, including our education workers, our special education workers, for their continued dedication and their work in a challenging time. And of course, to our senior staff and all of our teams that have been working through planning and replanning as we've continued to work through changes this year. I did want to update trustees on the key question that people are asking: when might we return to in-person learning? Today, chairs did meet with the Ministry of Education virtually, and that was asked again. We asked what criteria would be considered for school reopening, and we did hear again that hospitalizations are the key criteria right now, and they're what they call a lagging indicator. It takes time for hospitalization numbers to go up following a rise in COVID cases. So likewise, as COVID cases start to go down, and we're starting to see that, it takes a while for hospitalizations and hospital capacity to improve. So at this time, there's no clear indication of a timeline for a return to in-person learning, and I would anticipate that means we wouldn't have a change in delivery for the next few weeks at a minimum. And I know that's very vague, but I think it's important that our families know where we are and that we don't have any concrete timelines at this time. Today, you already asked about GSN and PPF funding. So as mentioned, we were told it is being finalized and to expect it soon. I hope soon means that we'll be getting it in April or shortly thereafter. We've already highlighted that we sent a letter to Public Health, and we're waiting on a response to understand and clarify the criteria for enacting Section 22 of the Public Health Promotion and Protection Act, and that would be the act that would require all staff and students to move to remote, but we are waiting on a response and look forward to that. And again, to our communities, as cases do start to decrease locally, we really encourage everyone in our community to keep up the important work of following the public health protocols, following the stay-at-home orders. If we all do our part, we will get through this more quickly. And lastly, I just wanted to send a message on behalf of the board to all of our students. We know this is not the year that you wanted in 2020 and 2021. We know that you've missed out on a lot of things, but you have worked so hard to get where you are, and we hope that you will continue to work with your teachers, work with your educators, work with your parents and your families and your peers to keep staying engaged, keep at it. We've got a little bit of time left in the school year. Hopefully we'll have some time back in person, but keep up the work. You've been doing a great job in a really challenging time. With that, I would like to get a motion to adjourn. So I'll look to Trustee Mulholland for a motion to adjourn, seconded by Trustee Tutt. Is anyone opposed to adjournment? Hearing none, the motion is adjourned. Please have a good night, everyone.
Left.
Penny D.
Left. Left.
Ray Mulholland.
Left. Left. Left.
Trustee Miller?
Left. Left. Left.